This is KTN News. KTN Prime Highlights in association with KCB Elimisha Insurance.
And it is not a question of whether he wants to appear or not. It is so directed that he appears before this committee on Thursday at 8:30.
Members of a joint parliamentary probe on contraband sugar angered by CS Fred Matiang'i for skipping their summon for the second time.
Kama Tuesday ndio ajinyoge Wednesday. Akanitumia message usiku wa kitu saa 2:58 akaniambia mama kwa heri sana shidwa ni nini ilikuwa baya na yeye.
The mystery of a man found dead after allegedly leaving a suicide note on his social media pages. Plus, regional leaders seek common expansion of infrastructure during the 14th summit on the Northern Corridor integration projects in Nairobi. And we'll tell you why mothers in the once rich breadbasket of Marsabit are turning to miraa farming to sustain livelihoods.
It's not just parenthood. We call it parenthood. KCB, go ahead.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back to the program. This is the big story right here on KTN News. We're glad you stayed with us. On a day, South Sudan President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar have reportedly inked an agreement to end the war in the youngest nation in Africa, a war that has resulted in the death of thousands and millions who have been displaced. In studio, I have Mark Bichachi, who is a regional affairs analyst. Joining me from London is Peter Piorajak, who is the chairman of South Sudan Young Leaders Forum. And joining me from Kampala once again is John Penny, who is a delegate in the ongoing talks and a representative from South Sudan civil society. Now, John, earlier on, Peter has talked about the different deals that have been there before between these two factions and which has not resulted to any tangible solution. How different is today's deal? I'm sure the details are going to be made public tomorrow, but how different is this deal and what makes you believe that this is going to perhaps provide a solution to South Sudan?
Well, I'm not sure because this deal has just come all of a sudden. It's news to me now. I'm watching news, though I am one of the technical support team that goes to Addis Ababa on the civil society ticket. But it is news to me. So it's between the two personalities, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar. The other political parties are not involved. They are getting it as news also. South Sudanese people are getting it as news. What do I mean here? I mean the inclusivity, which is one of the most important factors in solving the problem of South Sudan because it has involved everybody. So that one is already a doubt to the success of this deal. The second one is there are historical injustices, as you mentioned, even beyond the independence of the Republic of South Sudan. Historical injustices are very emotive feelings, kind of feeling. You know them in Kenya. So in this case, we know Sudan just released us out of pressure. And we have just come out. We have wriggled out. And now we are going back to the hands of Sudan. We have just cleared our debts, $3 billion, and we are going back now, taking back the oil to their care. I am seeing this as shocking to the people of South Sudan. It has to be explained anyway. So I blame the lack of inclusivity because it is only two leaders that struck the deal on our behalf. Something like division of the country, which is a historical factor, dividing the country into three. They have been complaining about dividing the country into 10, into 28, and now 32. They have changed from 32 all of a sudden to 3 regions. And these 3 regions have a historical connotation that they actually were introduced by Khartoum. And they are part of the grievances of 1983 that brought the Addis Ababa Agreement to an end. So what is it that is new that in dividing this country into former 3 regions that were rejected in the name of Kokora? Kokora is a local word for division. So I'm seeing a lot of provocation of our emotions, historical emotions, economic, political, ethnic, just imagine now we are going to be divided into three again. They have to explain it anyway. But I'm not seeing any success in this case because there is no inclusion. There are people in the bush like Paul Malong of South Sudan United Front, like South Sudan Opposition Alliance. They are at the door outside. So civil society are outside. We are still traveling around to see how we can join. So this has nothing to do with the people of South Sudan. It is the interest of the two gentlemen that sat down yesterday and today with their grantors, Salva Kiir and the president of Uganda. I don't know what is their interest there. Their interest is to bring peace to us. But if we are excluded as people of South Sudan, how
John.
can Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and the world come bring peace to us?
Yes, and
I'm
John,
not seeing anything here.
Yes, John, and I think Peter is in agreement with you. Peter, do you think, according to John, there's need to address what he has termed as historical injustices, deep-rooted problems? Even, you know, do you think these are things that maybe the 2 or 3 or so many factions there in Sudan should start from in order to get a lasting solution to this crisis?
Of course, I agree with John that if you are going to have a peace agreement, it should be a broad peace agreement that try to address as much of the problem as possible. And this is why when I was listening to the interview by Honorable Ababu November, I thought it was a bit funny because he was saying that they have been careful to ensure that whatever agreement is agreed is something that would hold. But not so long ago, when the talks in Addis Ababa collapsed, what they were proposing was essentially power sharing, basically reducing the problems of South Sudan to the issue of positions among the faction. They also proposed to increase the cabinet to 42 ministers, to increase the parliament, things that will not work. And it's exactly the same thing we are seeing in Khartoum. The thing about Khartoum thing is the blatant interest and the hidden agenda of Sudan, which is essentially to undermine the sovereignty of the people of South Sudan. As John mentioned, as we are speaking, there is something called transitional financial arrangement. And that was an agreement that was signed between South Sudan and Sudan for us to become free, for Sudan to recognize us. And that essentially led to us giving Sudan financial aid to the tune of $3 billion. South Sudan, the poorest country in the world, giving aid to Sudan. And also, as we speak, Sudan has a border blockade against South Sudan. The entire border, and it's the longest border we have, is closed. And it's closed by Sudan so that they punish South Sudan for seceding. So the idea that somehow an agreement will emerge from Khartoum.
So, Peter, you're suggesting that this agreement should not take place in Khartoum. You're suggesting that this kind of peace deal should not take place in Khartoum, right?
Absolutely. I think it's an insult that they're still sitting there and that they are not offended by the suggestion that Bashir is making, that he will protect our oil field.
Mark, I'd like to hear your view on this.
You know, there's wisdom in understanding a Swahili proverb, which I'll quote. Bianiani mbaya lakini kiatu chake dawa. The truth of the matter is this. At this point in South Sudan's history, it needs all the help it can get. I agree fully that the Sudan government has selfish interests. They have subverted the peace and stability of the region. In fact, the president of Sudan is a suspect at the International Criminal Court. Those things do not escape me. However, this is not the time in South Sudan history where we need to be picking where we find our solutions. If the idea is good and it is viable, then it does not matter where it comes from or where it was signed. The important thing is if Riek Machar and Salva Kiir can sit down and agree on even the most basic starting point of this peace process, then it's a step ahead. The second thing, we must understand that in the matters of war and peace, if hope does not spring up even from the littlest of seeds, then we lose the war against stopping a war. A war is easy to start, Ababu, so it is hard to stop. And what it takes from the experience in Kenya, the experience in Zimbabwe, the experiences across this continent, you will find that it takes the leadership of two people to see a vision beyond the crisis and begin to plant the seeds of hope. This, to me, is an opportunity for South Sudan to hope. Do not look the gift horse in the mouth. If there is a big chunk of it that is good, take it, but it does not stop. Listen, the not having peace will not change the strategy in Sudan. If South Sudan had peace today and it had a stable government, it would be able to negotiate better terms with Sudan, because it could be able to potentially threaten and say that we will turn all our oil fields and pass them through Ethiopia and pass them through Kenya and pass them through Uganda. What South Sudan needs as a matter of urgency in order to save lives, in order to save their economy, is to find a peace, a foothold, so that they are able to capture the mile that is rightfully theirs.
I'd like Peter to react to that very briefly. Now, Peter, perhaps let me just pose this question. I know the delegates are going to make their way to Nairobi after Khartoum. If they come to Nairobi, will you change your point of view with regards to the peace deal?
No, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the people should not be talking and they should not be talking in the region. My concern is what is happening in Khartoum, because if you read that agreement, and if you are anybody that care about your country, even if your country is in a complete anarchy, there is no way you will agree to bring the country that you get off your back for you to be free to come and protect your oil field. There is no way in which you will agree your country to be divided into 3 areas along regional and ethnic lines. We are trying to build a South Sudanese national identity. We have been fighting for over 50 years for such an identity. And what Sudan wants to do now is to destroy that identity. So would
you have a different view if the talks are brought to Nairobi?
Absolutely. Nairobi should be the right place. In fact, I've been arguing that the venue of Addis was wrong in the very beginning, because Ethiopian, they don't really understand South Sudanese as well as our neighbors in Kenya and Uganda do. And don't forget the peace agreement that actually led to the independence of South Sudan. That agreement was signed in Kenya, and it was mediated by a Kenyan retired general, General Sambueo. So we are not saying that region here is entirely a problem. What we are saying is we are very skeptical of Sudan. And there is no way Omar al-Bashir is wishing South Sudan well. Let me repeat again, Yusuf. Our borders now are not even demarcated because Sudan is refusing to demarcate our border. Don't forget also the territory of Abyei. This is a territory that belonged to South Sudan that was actually arbitrated by the International Court of Arbitration. But as we speak, that territory is still being occupied by Sudan. So it's completely naive for anybody whatsoever to think that Sudan is giving us help. No, Sudan is trying to manipulate our leaders because al-Bashir knows very well how to manipulate our leaders. And this is what he's trying to do. So if they sign this agreement in Khartoum, believe me, my brother, and let me repeat again, if they sign this agreement in Khartoum, nobody, not even the son of Salva Kiir is going to accept this. Not even the son of Riek Machar is going to accept this, because this will be a betrayal to all our martyrs, including Dr. John Garangda Mabior, who sacrificed his life for our country to come into existence.
I'd like to hear John's view on this. Let me bring John into this conversation. John, do you also have an issue with Khartoum being the venue of this deal that was struck today, apparently?
Yes, I have no issue with the venue. That's where I have a difference a bit with the rest of the people. My problem is not the venue. The problem is the value of the agreement. What is being signed there, we have not seen it. We don't know what it is, and we should own it. It is what I am going to implement. You see, this T-shirt is saying South Sudan is watching. This hashtag is about South Sudan is watching, so we have to watch what they are signing. I have no problem with being signed in Addis Ababa, Nairobi, or Khartoum. My problem is even the time. Why is it being swung around? Why do we run around the region with a piece of document that should be signed in one place? It can be signed in Khartoum, all right, but if we are all there and we all agree to the content, the value, not the venue, then I have no problem with that. We should be watching as South Sudanese and South Sudan as a country. If it is brought to Nairobi, I have no problem, only that it has not been originally studied in Nairobi. The CPA, Comprehensive Peace Agreement, was studied in Nairobi. This country actually was born in Kenya. I mean, it was conceived at Machakos. It was actually nursed in, the gestation period took place in Naivasha. It was born in Nairobi, the whole idea. Then we implemented it in the field. But I am not going to buy the idea of Zimbabwe, Kenya, all this. We move it to Rwanda so that it fits the context of Rwanda. No. We have to sit down as South Sudanese people wherever we can find a chair. And we sign our agreement according to our will. I don't have a problem with the chair. I can sit in Kampala, I can sit anywhere.
Yes,
but
John.
if they come in and say, I must pay for you, I must hire the chair, then that is a problem. Paying the incentives to the chair of the region, the seats we are occupying. I can go to Khartoum today. John, I have no problem with that.
John,
but I have a problem with somebody putting their interest.
Yes, I think you've delivered your point there. Mark, as we conclude this conversation, it seems apparent that there are so many other factions apart from Machar in South Sudan. And part of the deal today is that they are going to have 3 capitals, one in Juba, one in Wau, and Malakal, to host the 3 vice presidents. I don't know which model of government that is going to be, but of what significance is this going to be for South Sudan?
For me, what is significant in the idea of 3 regional capital cities is the realization that perhaps the solution is what has worked for a lot of countries, which is turning it into a federal state. They may not agree in terms of the borders or the numbers of these federal states that should exist, but the reality of the matter, it is a step ahead to realize that we as a nation fought for independence and we've not been able to homogenize ourselves. So for me, those are steps ahead in terms of just having the discussion about having these regions. It is very, very important. Let us take an example of Kenya. We need to understand that the county governments in the Republic of Kenya really toned down the tensions that used to be in this country. Let us remember, if you look at the number of tribal conflict that have happened in this country post the promulgation of the Constitution and pre the promulgation of the Constitution, you can see a total difference. But at the same time, you can see that we've not lost our nationality. We're still quintessentially Kenyan, but we are also proud of our counties, and there's nothing wrong with that. And what is important is let the South Sudanese not close their minds to the options of debate that are available. Peace comes, as they have said, by inclusivity, and it's not just inclusivity of people, it is inclusivity of ideas as well.
Well said, Mark. Peter, very briefly, you have a minute. Let's be solution-oriented here. What do you think is going to be a solution to this crisis in South Sudan?
I doubt if the solution will come from the leaders. As I mentioned time and time again, what is needed is for people of South Sudan to mobilize and organize themselves and bring the real solution to their country. Leaders will not do it. It will require the people of South Sudan. What Salva Kiir and Riek Machar are discussing is basically to sell the country for their position. And this is unacceptable. Nobody will accept it. Even if it means another struggle, we will do it. And there is no way we are going to allow Khartoum to come back and protect our oil fields.
Thank you, Peter Bior Ajak, for your input. Peter is the chairman of South Sudan's Young Leaders Forum. Mark Bichachi is the regional affairs analyst, as well as John Penn, who is a delegate in the ongoing talks and also a representative from South Sudan civil society. Many thanks, gentlemen, for your input. And of course, that brings us to the end of our program tonight. Many thanks for watching. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. Ben Kitili is up next with KTN Prime.